Welcome everyone to the first installment in Red Stage's webinar week, Enterprise Magento Enhancements for the New Mobile Era, sponsored by Adobe, Magento, and PayPal. Don't forget to submit questions during the webinar. Our speakers today are Adam Morris of Red Stage, Danny Hook of PayPal, and Bernie Chen of Magento. Welcome, panelists.
Thanks for having us. Hello.
Hi, everyone.
All right, so let's dive in. For the first question, panelists, what are the top trends merchants should have in mind for the year ahead? Bernie, why don't you start us off?
Thanks, everyone. I think there are a number of different trends that I've been looking at, and I think it all kind of centers back to this idea of the empowered consumer. And in thinking about that empowerment, I think it's a combination of generational change and technology, and actually the two of those creating a feedback loop that's actually driving this empowerment and the marketplace changes that we're seeing. And so out of this idea or this concept of the empowered consumer, I think there are a couple of different other trends that stem from that. We're seeing these buying journeys actually fragment quite a bit. The purchasing path, where it used to be simply a mobile site or simply a desktop site, is actually starting to fragment quite a bit. The start and the stop and the beginning and end of purchasing cycles are actually multiplying and expanding at an exponential rate. And it's just not only the purchase, it's also kind of the delivery. So there's that aspect of omni-channel and that last mile and how the product or how the service is delivered to the end consumer is delivered. That actually is also starting to fragment quite a bit. So that's one of those trends that comes out of this empowered consumer. Really quickly, another trend is the barriers to switching for these empowered consumers is becoming lower and lower. So I think the outcome of that is you have these fragile relationships or these relationships with your customers, which used to be a little more reinforced in the past, are becoming more and more fragile going forward. And so I think ultimately this idea of the empowered consumer is leading merchants to really be much more customer centric, much more experience driven in order to capture and keep those empowered consumers. And ultimately, it really points to the importance of the commerce platform as a business driver for success.
All right, thanks, Bernie. Adam, what are your thoughts?
Sure. So there's a couple of major trends that we're seeing this year emerging. I think one of the biggest ones that we see is that the B2B and the B2C experience are converging, right? Everybody is looking for that Amazon-like experience. You know, part of the driver, I think, has a lot to do with the changing of demographics, the change, what generation makes up the largest part of the workforce. B2B, of course, is seeing an incredible transformation very rapidly because of that change in demographic, and millennials are now already the largest generation in the workforce. And I think it's important because, studies like Bank of America are coming out that are saying they predict that Amazon Business will take 10% of all B2B in 2021 without even trying. So you see that those digital natives are looking for that Amazon-like experience, even in what would be a traditional, offline or even, limited ordering type scenario. And the Amazon trend has been going on for a long time in B2C. I mean, we've seen them take over, 40, 50% of the market, but we're still making discoveries on how they're accomplishing this. And one of which is, part of what we're talking about today is the mobile experience. Amazon has a very seamless mobile purchasing process because they have all of your information stored already. So they're able to skip a lot of the steps that other retailers might not be able to. So we're doing some research around that. So we're seeing everybody is looking to try to fix that mobile experience and get the mobile conversion up, because obviously the traffic that's coming from mobile devices is starting to well eclipse the traffic that's coming from desktop. And that, for people that really aren't targeting that, that means overall conversion rates are coming down, because that mobile's conversion is significantly lower than the desktop conversion.
All right, and Danny, what are your thoughts?
I was going to say, Adam, that's almost a perfect segue into mine. Thank you. It's around mobile, the mobile revenue gap. It's exactly that. We're trying to see, because like Adam was saying, we're actually a part of an initiative, and RedStage has been a great partner in being part of this initiative too, called the Mobile Optimization Initiative, where we're working with a third party called High Conversion. They're experts in testing, and we're trying to see what kind of changes can be used to see what works and also what doesn't work for mobile commerce, because we're seeing a ton of visitors on mobile. Over 60% of site traffic is coming from mobile, and those are different kinds of shoppers. So using a testing partner like High Conversion that's an expert in being able to test multiple tests at the same time, and to make sure that you're not diminishing the actual number of traffic, to make sure that you're not sending customers to tests that are failing. They're able to optimize, so you're not routing people to failing tests. You're not losing customers that you would by trying to figure out what is working and what isn't. It's really a big problem that needs a big group to solve, and that's what the Mobile Optimization Initiative is trying to do, is trying to figure out what kind of changes, both in the payment section, both in the checkout, lowering the checkout funnel and further up, to see what works on mobile. And also we've expanded that to desktop, really, because you don't want to optimize for one and take away from your desktop traffic at the same time.
Excellent. Great answers all around. I think this is really going to tie into the next question that we have lined up pretty perfectly. So we have, so millennials are driving massive changes in user experiences and payments, as we've all mentioned. What are some ways online retailers can adapt and capture more value from millennials? Let's start off with Bernie again.
When I think about millennials, I think about them in three. There's lots of ways to think about the millennial and kind of their behaviors, but three areas to think about are: one, they're prolific consumers of content. Two, and maybe this is not a surprise to many, they have, relatively speaking, short attention spans. And three, they're mobile, right? And so in order to capture value out of millennials, if we think about content on kind of the first step, making sure that content is rich, that it's dynamic, that it does connect to a path to purchase, being able to tell that brand story and keeping it up to date and relevant to what millennials are looking for. At Adobe, we have a saying, at least on the digital commerce side, of making sure that every moment is or every experience is purchasable or viable. And so from the standpoint of content consumers that millennials are, that I think is a very key area. With respect to short attention spans, again, I think both Danny and Adam touched on it in terms of the conversion rates on mobile being lower, and so really identifying those ways to make abandonment rates lower on mobile, to provide those streamlined checkout flows, and really thinking strategically about how conversion is done on mobile, in order to capture those mobile buyers, and the fact that on a mobile device they're already inherently more distracted than they might be at a desktop, on top of their short attention spans. And then just they're mobile, right? And always, because of mobile, and because this is a generation that really grew up with this technological feedback cycle that I mentioned earlier. Really thinking forward on what's the right technologies that need to be put in place to drive those mobile experiences. I know Magento 2 has PWAs, and PWAs or progressive web apps is just starting to come in on its own and take kind of the place of the next stage of mobile development and mobile experiences, and fitting PWA into a strategic roadmap and really seeing how that can fit into your overall mobile strategy. I think is also critical to capture millennial buying.
Thanks, Bernie. Maybe let's go to Danny next. Seems like this can kind of slide back into the initiative you were speaking of before.
Yeah, no, I think, like Bernie was saying, that this is the millennial generation has grown up with just this has always been at their hands. To be able to make purchases, to be able to grow up with the internet like that is a relatively new thing to kind of track on customers. And it's when you're shopping on mobile, when you're seeing these increases in people that are shopping on mobile, it's a different shopping mentality. It's not when you're on desktop, you're more kind of keen to browse. You're not sure what you're looking for really, but with mobile, it's more maybe you saw something on Instagram, you saw an ad there, so you click that link and then you're going to the checkout experience. You know what you want to purchase. It's not any kind of floundering in your mind. It's very direct. So the theme of the mobile optimization initiative this past quarter was around simplicity, and that's kind of trying to remove barriers to checkout to encourage more mobile conversions. And so some of the things had a really positive impact, like coupon collapse, auto cart update. A coupon collapse, just for more clarification on that, instead of displaying the coupon, it was just having it collapsed and an option to unroll it if you needed to enter in a coupon. And the auto cart update was something where you're not having to click a button to update your cart. PayPal also got very positive response, which we're very happy to find out selfishly, but it's also something that we found out didn't work so well was credit card auto detect, which is if you're typing in your credit card, being able to detect what card you're using instead of having to choose that from the dropdown. We're not sure why that had a negative side effect. It just kind of comes back to the whole testing thing. Some things that you kind of assume would be guaranteed winners, like credit card auto detect, seems like that would be a no-brainer, but it ended up not working. So that's kind of the nice thing that we're finding with this community of agencies and merchants that are testing. We're finding things that work for some and things that don't work for others, and just kind of learning as a group, which makes things really, really nice to see.
Great insight, Danny. And Adam, how do you think merchants can, adapt and capture more value from millennials?
Sure. So I think that one of the concepts that we've been really trying to drive home is that the way we look at mobile in general may have been wrong for the past few years. So responsive design was our concept. Most sites are built responsive. We brought up PWAs, which is kind of a new way to attack mobile, but we're still in a responsive design era, right? Now, the mission of responsive design originally was to be able to get all of your functionality from your desktop site to your mobile site. That was a novel concept, right? Mobile sites used to be a limited version, and responsive design promised that you'll get the full functionality on your mobile device. Now, as we've progressed, now we're realizing, especially as we have more data, that the way we use mobile devices and the way we expect to use mobile devices is just very different than the way we use a desktop device, especially during things like checkout. And I think that what we now have to look at is diverging those two experiences and not trying to create a one-size-fits-all. And, understandably, this adds a decent amount more complexity. However, with a lion's share of traffic starting to move to mobile devices, we really have to treat that as a separate entity, and we have to study how our customers want to be using that mobile device independently of the desktop. I mean, we talked about, one of the things that we hear and we just talked about is we want to make sure that we don't mess up the desktop experience while we're making tweaks on mobile. And that's kind of one of the curses of responsive design, right? Is it wants to be, everything to all people. So there are certain areas. PWA is a great example of how we can sort of diverge those experiences and focus on mobile, but also, finding ways that we can diverge them and making sure that if we have something that tests well on a mobile device, or that we make sure to implement that some way, separate from the desktop experience. And we start thinking about things like mobile wallets. How do people like to pay on mobile devices? What are the most popular payment platforms and checkout platforms and things? These are, if you look at your Venmo app versus, your like the most popular way to pay on a mobile device might be very different than the most popular way to pay on a desktop device. The most popular way to pay on a desktop device might be using your autofill from your browser, and by far the most popular way to pay on a mobile device might be, a PayPal, a Venmo, or one of the other mobile wallets that are out there. So we're starting to look at those things and track the actual behavior of mobile users rather than just sort of trying to shove a square peg into a round hole.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of different challenges that merchants are facing, and they definitely have to test things, as you and Danny and Bernie all spoke to really try and figure out what the right experience is for their customers on their site on various devices. So I guess going off of that, and Adam, you and I spoke a bit this morning about new developments in the B2B space. What with new information coming out about Amazon kind of jumping in there. So I'll ask the panel, how are B2C and some B2B companies closing that mobile gap by providing better experiences to millennial customers that match the Amazon experience, or kind of try and match the B2C experience at large? Maybe Adam, you could start us off on that one.
Sure. I think that one, B2B is pretty far behind B2C, right? So B2B is more of a catch-up game, and I'll just talk about that for a second because I'm not sure how much of the audience is on the B2B side, but we're seeing an incredibly fast transformation on the B2B side, and that's a necessity because of, like we talked about, that generational gap is changing. The people that are placing the orders are digital natives and looking at for that Amazon-like experience. So it's about B2B catching up to B2C, and the threat there is that Amazon is slowly eating up the market share, right? So if you're a commodity seller or a scientific seller, we're seeing Amazon business selling, medical devices and equipment and things that we never thought that they would sell. I mean, go back years ago, they were a bookseller, right? So they're starting to eat up these markets. And we need to, in B2B, we need to not only give the existing customers, that B2C-like experience, but we need to optimize it and get ahead of it so that Amazon doesn't eat. We saw Amazon take 40%, 50% of e-commerce, like I mentioned, and they're projected to take 10, but we're obviously going to see that grow. So we need to obviously get ahead of it. And on the B2C side, for us, it's the specific tactics to get ahead of this is figuring out how we can make that experience as seamless as possible in terms of the shipping, payments, checkout. All of these things on a company like Amazon are just literally a button click, right? So looking at all of the stages of the purchase after somebody goes from a shopper, right, to trying to convert to be a buyer, how can we look at testing and optimizing each one of those stages?
Awesome. And Danny, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, kind of going off, especially from a payments perspective. PayPal, we have a product called Smart Payment Buttons, which kind of goes into that one-touch experience. There's always been PayPal One Touch, which tries to simplify that payment option for customers coming back that are repeat purchasers. So you don't have to sign into your PayPal account, because when you're on mobile, when you're going after these mobile customers, and since millennials are making those kind of purchasing decisions at B2B companies now, they're expecting to have that same kind of experience. Now, I would assume that's it probably is like more on like tablets and things like that, as people kind of have more of an option to downsize and what the overhead that they're sharing really. But in terms of from a B2C perspective, we know that customers, like, they want that simplicity option. So things like Venmo really does appeal to those millennial customers, because you're seeing an ad, you're going directly to it. If you can pay directly from just clicking a button, that's using your Venmo balance. You're able to share that too. That gets more, your friends see that you actually have shared that, and they see that new purchase, they might be alerted to that as well. Then it's kind of, it's really simple how fast that can kind of gain traction at that point. There's also, in terms of kind of higher price items, what we're seeing is that customers want to buy something maybe, but they don't want to have to pay for that all at once. And PayPal Credit is another button that's a part of this smart payment bundle, which lets you pay with your credit card if you'd like to. It lets you pay with PayPal checkout like you're used to, or these other options like Venmo and PayPal Credit. And PayPal Credit lets you finance that. So the merchant, it's really nice. The merchant gets all the money up front, but PayPal collects those payments over time, and the customer doesn't have to worry about paying $250 all at once. They can make smaller payments and make something more realistic for them to buy. So having those kind of simple checkout options can really be the way to increase conversions, because you simplify that process so much.
Danny, just to jump in after that, I think you made a really, really good point about the payment over time. I can't remember who put out the study off the top of my head. We'll have to follow up with that. But, talking about millennials in general being a pretty frugal generation. However, the easiest way to trick them, and this is with the wording in the study too, which I think is funny. The easiest way to trick them is offer a payment plan. Millennials will go straight for a payment plan over any other generation. They do not mind monthly payments at all. So having some sort of financing option, we find is also key, especially for higher dollar items.
Oh yeah, I mean, think about just all the other kind of subscription like products that people are that I think millennials have been targeted for, like the HelloFresh, Netflix. Just, you have that as just kind of like another, oh, this is another monthly thing that I have to pay for a little bit. That's cool. It definitely makes it a little bit easier to bear at that point.
And Bernie, do you have any thoughts on the, how companies can provide better experiences to appeal to that millennial subscription-driven SaaS model millennial generation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think Adam and Danny really captured a lot of the thinking that I have here. I mean, when I think about the Amazon experience, I think about it as, B2B, really optimized B2B experiences, being able to search for product very easily. And then that very smooth, fast, quick conversion flow that they have built across all their touch points. And then really at the end, and the Amazon Prime experience is about that delivery and that quick delivery. And so when thinking about how to really close the gap, I think I like to take a quick step, and Adam really touched on this. I mean, basically you take a look at the entire experience, entire flow of the customer from the moment they hit the site, finding the product that they want, how to convert very quickly, and then get that delivery in the way that they want to, as quickly as they want to. And that to me is the Amazon experience. And so when you take a look at your commerce solution, and the implementation of that commerce solution, how are you putting in the right technologies, working with your partner in order to deliver and execute in the absolute best possible way across that experience?
Great. And building off of that, creating a new experience, what do you think are some of the top benefits of migrating from Magento 1 to Magento 2? And why should merchants be thinking about Magento instead of other platforms?
Do we have an hour here? No, I think there's all kidding aside, I do think that obviously I'm at Adobe and Magento, and we're very, very proud of all the technology and all the effort that we built into Magento Commerce 2. I guess to summarize it a little bit here is it really starts with what success looks like for our merchants. And in this new world that we've been talking about, 4 points of success really are around delivering these shopping experiences, these superior experiences across the digital touch points, and being able to execute on that. It's about being able to grow your business quickly and continuously, not only today, but skating where the puck is, right? We don't necessarily know where the future is, and being able to have that flexibility in order to fast track your growth going forward. With all of this fragmentation of technology that we've been talking about, there's a lot of operational challenges that go with it, as well as a lot of information and data. And so how is the commerce platform, how are your technologies helping you operate faster, better, smarter, with more intelligence, so that you can actually feed that back into your business and again, continuously innovate on it. And then, of course, as we talk about desktop performance, we also have to talk about mobile performance. For, I guess, a long time now, performance on mobile is no longer separate from the experience. I think they're really one and the same. And so when we think about, if we take it to Magento Commerce 2, without going into all the detail about what's in the product, I mean, you have rich commerce functionality and capabilities, whether it's page builder, content staging, preview, a whole slew of capabilities that distinguish it from not only the competitive set, but also from Magento Commerce 1, as well as open source, our open source product. So you have all this rich functionality and capability. You also have what's represented on this call, right? You have partners, you have technology partners, you have an ecosystem and a community that is arguably the largest on the planet. And that's really, really critical. And I do think size matters here, because it means you have talent, a deep pool of talent that has really seen every single use case, business model, challenge, commerce challenge, and they developed solutions for them. And the second point around that size is that there's all this innovation that's happening, all this change that's happening in the marketplace by both the consumer end as well as on the technological end. And does the ecosystem and the community, can they innovate at that pace? Can they innovate ahead of that and incorporate it back into the commerce solutions that you're deploying? So that's another huge aspect about being in the Magento ecosystem, as well as being on Magento 2. But the last thing I'll touch on really briefly is also Magento is built around flexibility and extensibility and integration with third-party solutions. And so being able to take those core rich functionalities that I mentioned, plus all the innovation, working with our technology partners, working with your solution your partners, and innovating it, and have the flexibility and capability to do that to your particular business use case, is what I think really distinguishes Magento Commerce 2 from previous Magento products and open source, as well as the competitive set.
Thanks, Bernie. Danny or Adam, do you have anything to add? Bernie's answer was pretty well-rounded. Maybe we might want to get to the next question if you guys don't have anything to add.
I could just jump in quickly. I think that there's some other key points to add. That we see is one is it's a chance to rethink the strategy. And we were talking about payments before, and we were talking about strategy. One of the themes that we're discussing here is mobile. Divergence from desktop, a millennial generation, all of that. And this is the time to start, have a little bit of a reboot and a reset and start from the ground up and think about that strategy. I was just thinking about one thing that I forgot to mention before is one of the things we're testing with some of our clients is to, on checkout, when we talk about the payments do we promote the mobile first payment options first, really looking at it in a completely different way. And, when you're making those major modifications, things like, building them into a new platform strategy also makes a ton of sense. Plus, we're finding that something like Magento 2 generally has a lot more baked in functionality than some of the previous platforms. So it's a time to reduce complexity of the system overall, especially if you're a B2B merchant or thinking of going B2B, or adding B2B to your business. The built-in B2B module is a fantastic set of, what would normally be very complex and burdensome feature sets to implement. And then things like, the page builder, which was already mentioned, totally different way to think about the content strategy there and the way we can maintain and add content. And we talked about the content strategy early on. If we want to have a content strategy, we might have been limited by the technology we have before, and now it will be, more on a limitless basis. So pieces like that, we want to look. One of the things we try to do is look from the ground up and say, okay, what if in an ideal scenario, what should we be doing, and does that fit with a modern platform that we have now? Look at Magento 1; it's a over 10-year-old platform now, and what our capabilities that we can have today are quite a bit different. So it's a good time for that rethink.
Thanks, Adam. Any final notes, Danny?
Yeah, I was going to say Bernie and Adam pretty much summed everything up. One kind of thing I wanted to tag on to, Bernie mentioned the community, and that's really been something that I've been able to see firsthand with this testing initiative that we've been a part of for mobile optimization. Is that it's a group that really folks know each other, they really learn from each other. That's something that is really invaluable, especially in the testing initiative that we're a part of, and also talking about simplifying, like Adam was saying. I know smart payment buttons are built into the core of Magento, so when you're talking about these different payment options, instead of having to have multiple extensions running, you're able to simplify that process a lot of times. So yeah, just kind of tagging on to great answers from them, but that was my little 2 cents.
Thanks, Danny. And for the sake of time, let's make this the last question we're going to go through today. But what advice would you guys give to merchants who plan to migrate? Is there anything very critical they need to know? What are those last final thoughts on the subject? Let's start with Bernie.
I actually think Adam hit a lot of strong points on this question with his last comments. I mean, so I would say start now. I mean, and one of the main reasons is what Adam was talking about, which is this is a really great opportunity in terms of the migration to really take a step back and think strategically about where your business needs to go, wants to go, and what are the business requirements. So what you have, say, on your Magento 1 instance, you may get out of the box in Magento 2. You might actually not need some of the things that you have in Magento 1 because your business is evolving into a different direction. So the ability, the actual, having the time to think very strategically about that is so important. And we hear actually quite often how merchants who have taken that time are seeing huge rewards from that now that they're on Magento 2. So there's that strategic assessment of their business, taking the time to go through requirements, go through what is needed, what is not needed, what comes out of the box and native in Magento 2, and then really giving yourself the time to implement, test, and launch. I think just starting early is a fantastic kind of piece of advice. Certainly, merchant can execute and implement very quickly, but it's certainly, I think, the long-term gains will be really born out of taking that methodical, strategic approach.
Thanks, Bernie. Danny, anything to add?
Yeah, I'd say from because I know that is a big project when you're talking about moving over, when you're talking about replatforming to Magento 2. That's a time when there's a lot of changes happening, so maybe you don't want to take on any additional challenges. One thing that we found from this group of SIs that we're working with is that to put there's the partner that we're working with called High Conversion. They have a way to do, we call it like a health check tag, which is basically a way to just track information about the customers, like where they're shopping, what's working, what's not. It's not implementing any tests, but it's a good way to kind of, as you're making these changes, to learn more about your customers at the same time. And when you learn about your customers like that, a lot of the merchants have actually found it worth their while to jump into the program to do actual treatments to see what kind of treatments or tests. Sorry if we use that term interchangeably. I realize that could have been confusing. But to implement tests to see, okay, now I have this information, let's do these tests, just to continue that learning process. Because customers will continue to change. That's the one thing that humans we're very good at, is we're good at evolving and good at changing. And so I think the more information you have means you'll be better equipped for how to respond to those.
Perfect. And Adam, final note is yours.
Awesome. Yeah. I mean that hits the nail on the head. I think that the first point here is data, and data. You know, we want to maximize our investment in any platform shift. You know, we want to reduce our total cost of ownership, right? And we want to maximize our investment. I mean, we've seen you know, some clients that you know, can have a 30% increase in conversion rate from a re-platform because we've baked a lot in of what we kind of know we've needed and some change in strategy. So gathering the data, if we're not already gathering data on our sales funnel and where the kinks are, right? And if we're not gathering data on mobile, doing some tests or those kind of things, the time is now to start at least putting something like that health check tag or what have you, and looking at, you know, where the problems are. If we don't, we have a lot of clients that come to us that they'll say, our product page is terrible, we need to mess with the product page. And then we realize that in the funnel, actually most people are dropping off on the home page. And we can optimize the product page all we want, but if the home page is really where people are leaving, then that only gives us a certain amount of gains. And the same side, the cart or checkout, especially with more complex products, going from the shopper to the conversion, like we see those kinks in the funnel, and we want to make sure that's where the area of focus, so we take that learning and put it into the new platform change. So, you know, obviously we're going to put a focus on mobile when we do these changes, but without data, we're taking a little bit of shots in the dark. So just something to think about as, you know, the more data we have, if we're going to be spending money, spending time and go through this, the more data we have, the more that the team that is creating the new site is going to be able to take advantage of that and provide an ROI on it.
Excellent. That looks like all the time we have for today. Thanks again to all the speakers for joining us, and stay tuned for more webinars in the series. Don't forget to join us or join the Mobile Optimization Initiative. You can follow the link on the page right here, or reach out to info@redstage.com to learn more. Enjoy the rest of your workday, and thanks for watching. Thanks again, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.